Good afternoon. My name is John Dennehy, Secretary General of Bussola Institute, and I warmly welcome everybody to this afternoon's Bussola Institute webinar on the topic of technology, research networks, and knowledge transfer, promoting collaboration and investment between the GCC and the EU. As you are all aware, the challenges arising from the outbreak of COVID-19 as a global health emergency and the resulting socio-economic crisis are testing existing structures of cooperation and solidarity across the world. As the health and human toll grows in every continent, the damage done to the global economy is already evident and represents the highest of the largest economic shock the world has experienced in decades. The initial instinctive reaction to the COVID-19 crisis by most countries was to look inwards and act alone. As a result, many borders have closed, many supply chains have been disrupted, and much economic activity has fallen. Most countries now face multiple crises: a health crisis, a financial crisis, and a major surge in unemployment, all of which interact in complex ways. And of course, there is considerable uncertainty about what the economic landscape will look like when we emerge from the pandemic. We do not know with any certainty what a post-COVID-19 world will look like. However, we do know that high-quality international cooperation is fundamental if we are to deal effectively with existing and emerging global challenges. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has written several recent papers on COVID-19, and one he has written, the title of it is, "We Will Come Through This Together," thereby reminding us that no country can tackle this issue alone and that international cooperation is crucial for addressing existing challenges. Against this background, we've asked our distinguished panel of speakers, of experts here, to explore this afternoon how the EU and GCC might develop stronger research networks to contribute to better and more effective knowledge transfer and encourage shared understanding of our digital future. I know that this topic is very relevant, timely, and pivotal to the policy agenda, both in Europe and in the Gulf. This afternoon's webinar will also explore ways and means of promoting co-investment and encouraging cooperation between the EU and GCC, particularly using leading-edge technology and digital innovation to address the wide range of challenges arising in both regions resulting from COVID-19. There will also be a specific focus on establishing stronger links between youth in both regions and exploring how these networks can be used to broaden mutual understanding. I extend a very special welcome to our three eminent speakers this afternoon. They are Mr. Max Mergoli, Executive Vice President of the Worldwide Partnerships at the Inter-University Microelectronics Center, IMEC, which is a cutting-edge international research, development, and innovation hub based in Belgium. Max will focus on the perspectives of European research and development companies on international cooperation. Our second panelist this afternoon is Dr. Takar Shrikant, or better known as Tiki, who has held senior positions at several leading technology companies in Silicon Valley. He is currently the Chief Research Officer at the Technological Innovation Institute in Abu Dhabi. Tiki will focus on the perspectives of the big tech companies on foreign investment in research and development in emerging markets. Our third speaker, whom you can't unfortunately see because there's some kind of problem with her camera, is Maria Luisa Tambora, and Maria Luisa is the Policy Officer for International Cooperation at the DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission. Maria Luisa will focus on European Union collaboration with the Gulf Cooperation Council region. We are very fortunate that Dr. Sami Marhoum, Director of Research and Strategy at Dubai Future Labs and visiting professor at the Free University of Brussels, has kindly agreed to act as moderator for us today. Sami has had extensive experience of working both in Europe and the Gulf as a researcher, an analyst, a senior academic, and an advisor to governments and international organizations. I am really, really very grateful to all four of you, and I look forward very much to a fruitful discussion. And what I would love to see coming out of this discussion today is solid, practical recommendations and concrete proposals for action based on your vast collective experience and expertise. So with that, I hand over to you, Sami, and you can take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Look forward to a very productive and hopefully insightful almost 53 minutes remaining of this session. As John has said, I'm a researcher by profession and background and by passion, and I wanted to make sure that you leave this webinar with at least some new data in mind. So allow me to share my screen for a few minutes to give you some very interesting data about the state of research and science in the GCC, and then use that as a background to kick off the discussion with our panelists. The host disabled participant. Okay, so if I could please be given the right to share a screen so that I can share my slides. Jihan.
Jihan.
Okay. Yep. Okay, there we go. Share. So it's always. Can you see my screen now? Okay. Yeah, let's do it this way. All right, good. So a recent report study done by the management consultancy PwC has actually identified a number of interesting insights about the state of research in the GCC. As we can see from this chart, all GCC countries remain way behind the OECD average in terms of their expenditure on R&D as a share of their GDP. But we see some progress done in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and where the gap between the OECD average and the national expenditure on R&D has shrunk in comparative with the previous years, but also in comparative to the other nations. Nevertheless, it goes without saying that there is still a long way to go for the region to reach international standards in terms of investment in R&D. The bulk of this, the bulk of the shortage comes from a weak investment on behalf of the private sector. Universities, in fact, have been quite active investing and conducting R&D, but it's when it comes to the private sector, we see a lack of that. Some countries like Japan and the US, the private sector spends almost 80% of the national expenditure on R&D. So we expect that the private sector to double its effort in this regard. A large percentage, a large reason behind the shortage in private expansion R&D is the weak linkages between university research and industry, and this is something that most GCC countries have begun to address by creating some instruments and special funds to bridge this juncture. When we look at the concentration of research activity, it's quite dispersed, but we find that medical research to be the strongest field, the strongest target of at least university research. The region has had a long history of taking up medical research, but also in practicing medical profession. It's something that historically the Middle East has been well known for it. We've seen, in fact, medicine take over engineering as a main area of research activities in a number of countries. Collectively, engineering is still dominant, but by a very small fraction. But medicine has caught up in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Now, in terms of international collaboration, if we look at the data for the last this is from 2010 to 2018, there too, we can get a very interesting perspective on which countries each of the GCC countries collaborate with. And this is usually captured and measured by looking at co-authored papers, co-authored scientific papers. We find Saudi Arabia being the largest country in terms of population. So naturally, it has the highest number of co-authored papers. It co-authors mostly with Egypt, but then secondly with the US, and thirdly with India. UAE too, it has the USA among the top 3 co-authors, but we see very clear pattern there of collaboration with Anglo-Saxon countries, so English language, but also the US, Canada, and the UK being being traditional destinations for GCC students and researchers to go to train. We see a clear lack of European countries other than the UK among the most collaborated with list of nations. So the list, I don't want to spend too much time on the slides. I'm aware of the limitation of the time, but it's quite self-explanatory. The USA is almost always consistently the top partner in terms of research, followed by some regional cooperation with India being the non-Western country that the GCC researchers collaborate with the most. If we look at universities on the right-hand side, you will see that Saudi universities tend to be the most productive in that sense. That a large part of that because historically they've been older than other universities in the region, but they're also larger. So they have produced most of the papers in the region. The conclusions that was made by the study is that there remain traditional problems of lack of funding, weak linkages with industry, but also international collaboration remain at the minimal level. Again, if we were to look at historic data, we see that it has been improving, that the situation have picked up a lot since, let's say, the 90s, even the mid-2000s, but there's still a long way to go, given the level of ambition that exists and the resources that are available in the region, but also the exposure, the global exposure commercially of this region to the rest of the world, which is not yet matched by an equivalent scientific exposure. I want to discuss this a little bit later as we talk about networks and collaborations, but this is a piece of work we did a few years back that looked at the Arab/MENA diaspora inventors in the US and their concentration in the major big tech companies. We've seen their presence in key and critical technology areas at Microsoft, Apple, and Google. This is when we say that diaspora, the Arab region, the MENA region diaspora, this is an extension of the GCC. A lot of the Arabic and Middle Eastern diaspora in the West come back and work in the GCC region. When we look at the distribution of inventors from the MENA region globally, we see that 42% of them actually reside in the US and 23% of them reside in Europe. If we compare Middle Eastern inventors, or those who hold patents and are residents in Europe, we find that their share of presence there compared to those from India, China, and elsewhere is significantly larger, which indicates that there is a very strong opportunity for Europe to leverage the Middle Eastern diaspora to create links with the home region. Again, when we looked at the background of executives from the region, C-suite level executives working in the US who held their degrees from outside the US, and whom we could trace to the region by looking at their first name, we find that there's the highest concentration of these in the IT sector. So this is another pointer or indicator to where we might expect the international collaboration to happen between the region and other parts of the world. So the data that we worked with is available for the US. It's more available for the US than for Europe, but the discussion, I would say, would still be the same vis-a-vis the region. This is what I wanted to share with you so far, and in terms of data. And right now, I need to figure out how I stop sharing, okay? And so that I can see you again. And my first question would go to you, Tiki, because I know you've moved to the region from the US rather quite recently, if I'm not mistaken. You arrived here, and then the COVID-19 drama happened. And I was wondering what kind of low-hanging fruit or opportunity that occurred to you from this experience, being here, facing this drama, and thinking of how could the place like the GCC benefit from these international networks around science, research, and technology, especially at times when we're looking at science to help us to get out of this COVID-19 crisis?
So a little bit of background for people who don't know the background behind me. Sammy and I were talking about today was, hey, what should I put? Otherwise, you're going to see my blank wall at the back. And so what you see behind is the beautiful Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi. And given that, I've been in Abu Dhabi now, this is my third year. So it's been, a couple of years. I've spent time at a startup company in cybersecurity. I was the EVP and chief scientist there for engineering and technology. And one of the things that, we did unique with a startup was we created some really unique products, like this Katim phone that basically was fully end-to-end secure phone. It wasn't just the phone by itself, it was the back-end services, et cetera, et cetera. And, I was just looking a couple of days ago to see, what are some of the new secure phones that are around? And Katim was listed at the top of the table. And so what was unique about that is we created something which was world-class. Here in Abu Dhabi, we had, a team in Canada, in Finland, in India, but main center was Abu Dhabi. And so what you take away from that is that and I worked, as you've seen from my background, gazillion years at Intel and at HP and some of the other companies there in the Silicon Valley. And this was one of the best teams I've seen. We created from about 60 people when I started to 500 when I left the job, and just in engineering. And just to give you some, to see that something like this can be created here. So I think first of all, the vision of the company was with His Excellency Faisal Banai, and he's the one who kind of brought us over in terms of what vision he had for the country, what vision he had for this, secure communications and security, which is vital to this area. So for me, the big thing is there is a lot of opportunity here in the GCC area. There's a hunger for technology. There is a hunger to develop local first, technology. This is not make America great, but become self-reliant, instead of being spoon-fed by multinational companies and such, to become reliable, grow the talent here, build the technology here, and support the industry. And support the technology here so that you're not reliant on just USA or China or Russia for some of these big things. So the opportunity is here in this area for creating something that is local, that is, uses, grows the talent here, as well as, building some really world-class products. Of course, we needed to have people from US, have people from, Europe join us, but this is an opportunity for collaboration between different countries here.
Tiki, just a quick follow-up question on this. What would be, in your opinion, the most effective collaboration mechanism between, let's say, a startup in the GCC and a European research center? What would be, in your opinion, the right way of collaborating?
I'll just go back to the last company, and there were companies that supported, the company I worked with, and it wasn't research, but they collaborated. They allowed things like VMware, was one of the companies that, really kind of pushed their technology, helped us to get jump started. What I think as you move to research area, which is one of the areas that I now work in, we are working with at least 2 universities in Europe, and, we just approved a project with a university in Finland. We are looking at, university in Switzerland, to work with, and Italy. So in terms of, I think there is motivations for both areas to collaborate, across Europe, and it's no longer just United Kingdom, which I saw from your picture there. It is, all these other universities where there's a lot of talent, and we are finding it a great talent to bring in. We also brought in, just to give you one other example, is we hired one of the chief scientists out of Barcelona Computing Center on quantum computing to lead work here in Abu Dhabi. Really in Abu Dhabi, quantum computing, yes, we were able to attract this, world-class talent to bring them here. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to collaborate, because not only we were able to bring that talent here, but we're able to link that back to Barcelona, for example.
Very interesting. Max, you represent a European research and technology organization, an applied research organization that historically was well known in the field of nanotechnology and microtechnology, and it still is, but now it has expanded its portfolio. And you represent them in the US. You're right now joining us from Oregon, right? And otherwise you're usually based in Silicon Valley. What kind of advantages do you think European research centers give or provide equivalent centers or businesses in the GCC, for example?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank Mr. Dennehy for a very kind introduction. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Mahroom, for inviting me to the webinar, and a very special greeting to Dr. Tambora and Dr. Takar. I am honored to be in their company. For our friends and colleagues who are joining from the Gulf region, Salaam alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I wanted to first explain what an RTO is, because it keeps being referred to, and what is the uniqueness of IMEC as an organization before I answer your question, if you indulge me for a minute. IMEC is rather unique as a research organization because there are fantastic universities across the globe and there are fantastic companies, but someone needs to take the ideas and the bright ideas that there are in the universities and translate them into a usable technology that companies can then take and productize. If you look at the goal of science and research is to improve the lives of the society, at least that's the mission we have. IMEC has been able to assemble over 4,000 of the top scientists from across 97 countries. We have given them infrastructure that is over 2.5 billion euros and allowed them to create technologies. Then over 700 globally recognized partners of IMEC from across the globe turn into products that serve the needs of the society and improve the lives of individuals in the society. Now, we work, in my capacity, I work across the globe. I work with China, which happens to be in Asia, one of the centers of technology. I work with US, that happens to be one of the centers of technology. And I also work with the Gulf region and Europe. What you will see is that technology that comes from university and gets matured and improved in IMEC, then pass to companies. And if you look at successful companies, each region, based on the cultural and the societal need of that region, is entitled, and in fact, it is best served by companies that they are from that region. I'll give you a perfect example. Amazon found a very, very nice area to improve the way the commerce is handled. The version of it in China is Alibaba. It's equally as successful, if it's not more, and it's thriving on both sides of the ocean. I give you an example that is very close to Tiki's area, Careem. Uber started in US, Careem started in the Gulf region. Why? Because it served the sensitivities, the needs of the culture that is present in the Gulf region. The fallacy, which I call the fallacy, that Gulf region cannot create successful companies is nothing but a fallacy, because what you need is a market, you need access to capital, you need also to have access to talent. Talent, as Tiki mentioned, has no problem coming to the Gulf region. And if you look at access to the capital and access to the market, Gulf region is rather unique because you can bring the entire Arab-speaking community together and serve them. And as a result, since the technology does not necessarily naturally bubble up from that region, the Gulf region should be looking at areas like Europe or US for collaborations to create and fulfill the needs of the society that is present. I can tell you that I have been looking on behalf of IMEC for areas of collaboration in the Gulf region. In fact, with Dubai Future Foundation, which you have been involved with, we have been trying to have a project, and we have one project now together. IMEC doesn't belong to a continent. We belong to where we can fulfill the needs of the society to improve the lives of the society. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Max. I'll come back to you in a while. Maria Luisa, I know we cannot see you, but we know you're there, and I know that you manage the GCC portfolio with the European Commission. I personally have been looking at opportunities for the GCC to participate in the Horizon 2020, but also hopefully soon in the Horizon Europe program. And I will let you explain a little bit what Horizon is for those here who are not familiar with it. And I wanted to hear from you whether the Commission has any special plans within Horizon for the GCC region, and whether you've had any traffic from this region coming through your doors, inquiring about it at all. I'm very excited to hear about it from you.
Good afternoon, salam alaikum. I'm glad to be here. I'm really sorry for these inconvenience. I cannot connect via video. So hopefully you can hear me well. I'm very happy and pleased to be with you today and to learn many things. Thank you for both introductory words, also with the facts and figures. Very, very helpful study that you point at, Sami. So thank you so much. And it's very enriching to have the perspective from the other speakers about the opportunities in the region. So it's always a learning opportunity for us. So I'm glad to have the chance to shortly introduce the current framework program for research and innovation, which is called Horizon 2020. Which basically is the largest international research and innovation program in the world. It's a program that addresses several issues, and it covers a wide variety of topics, and especially the areas in which we have most of the international cooperation are the so-called grand challenges, global challenges that, basically range from climate and environment, food security, food systems, and energy, mobility. So there are ICTs and health, of course. So there are so many areas that are covered and that require international cooperation. Now, of course, we are in a transitionary period, in the sense that we are moving from this so-called Horizon 2020 program to the new one that will start in 2021, called Horizon Europe. The Commission proposals has proposed a budgetary envelope of 100 billion for the program. And let's say that the international cooperation modalities will not be dramatically different, in the sense that at the moment and in the future, we have a policy that is called the general opening. So basically the program is open to any country in the world. Nonetheless, we do not fund, so not all the organizations from any country are, I mean, not all are eligible for funding. We fund, of course, the European Union organizations. We fund also the so-called associated countries, and we fund low and medium income countries. So basically, as you can see, the Gulf are not under these categories. So therefore, another modality that has been already ventured is the so-called targeted topics. So we identify specific areas in which we want cooperation with a targeted country or a targeted region. So I'm glad to perhaps inform, if you don't know, that at the moment there is a call that is open, and it targets specifically Gulf GCC countries. It's on concentrated solar power and desalination. So it means that basically it's the result of a dialogue that has been carried out previously with the various countries, and that with the expert, there was the identification of a number of priorities, and this one was the one that was put as first joint area for cooperation. So in the future, we will have to identify others, of course, also in the light of the new political priorities. And then, of course, we are also expecting perhaps some developments on the region-to-region dialogue. I mean, there has been some kind of reopening of the EU-GCC dialogue just recently. But at the same time, I have to say we will keep on strengthening the bilateral dialogues with the single countries. In the future, I'm sorry, I wanted to say that in the past, we have been concentrating the dialogue with basically the main countries that you highlighted, or including Oman also, that was also interested in research and innovation cooperation. So we will continue, and basically we will also use the opportunities created by these sectoral dialogues, so that we also look at a more strategic and high-level endorsement of any joint action in the future. But at the same time, we realize that, I mean, what has been done so far is a good start, but we need to strengthen some modalities of cooperation. What has been done so far is not enough. And therefore, we have already discussed with some of the funding agencies, for example, in Qatar, in Kuwait, and hopefully we will also engage with the Emirates, possibly Oman, and perhaps in the future we'll see also Saudi Arabia. But let's say that we have identified as an area to improve is capacity building. So our program works on the basis of networks that support the promotion of the framework program. These are called so-called national contact points, or focal points if you prefer. So we will need to set up these networks. These networks will then interact with the European corresponding national contact points. We also had a request for training for public officials to better understand how the program works. Because there is, I mean, it's a complex program with many different pillars, actions, and instruments. So, of course, it will require also some understanding and actual mutual understanding. I mean, we will also need to learn from the countries. We also are trying to work in certain areas with ongoing projects funded by the so-called foreign partnership instruments. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there is a network which is called EU-GCC Clean Energy Network. And there also we are already working with them to strengthen the so-called, the research and innovation dimension and activities under that network. And then eventually, as I said, because the GCC countries are not eligible for funding, they will have to provide funding from their own budget. So what we would like also to do is to support and help in establishing the so-called matching fund. So what we do in general with countries that are not eligible for funding is that there is a corresponding fund that is made available by the funding agencies in the country that would support the research organizations that are part of a winning consortium. So therefore, we have to see the mechanics. So that's why it's important, this training, as I was saying before, because it requires to understand, you know, how the two different rules, I mean, from the framework program and from the country in the Gulf region, can interact and can have some kind of interplay. And so we will have to see how this can be worked out in the future. So I think, yes, this is the more down to earth and operational part. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah. Maria Luisa, I personally have benefited from a Marie Curie mobility fellowship. I was wondering whether something like that couldn't be envisaged between the GCC and the EU, where you can create a mobility program funded under the New Horizon program to allow researchers from the GCC to spend time in Europe, young researchers, youth, and researchers from the EU to come and spend some time at the local universities here, or even perhaps between businesses, between industrial research units in Europe and in the region. Is that something that, in your opinion, foreseeable, is feasible, something that could be achieved within these dialogue networks between the two regions?
Well, actually, the opportunities under the scholarship system are quite open to the whole world. So we will have to work this out. But let's keep in mind that this is also on it's a bottom-up type of process. Whereas, you know, under the societal challenges, we have what we look after the political priorities, and so we are able to steer much more. There, of course, we can have a scheme, but not necessarily in a specific area. So it will be up to the consortia to come up with meaningful proposals. And
because the Horizon program is quite visible in places like Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, so around the Mediterranean basin, yes, but really not that visible in this region, I can tell you from experience. So if we were to wait for bottom-up initiatives, I think we may have to wait long still. There's definitely an opportunity there to be more proactive, perhaps, and create more buzz around these opportunities between the two regions. Let me go back to you, Tiki. Maybe it's I mean, feel free to answer it or not. But what would you like to see change in this region? What would you like to see improved in order for greater collaboration between knowledge-intensive businesses, so to speak, but also research establishments in this region and their counterpart in Europe and elsewhere in the world?
So, thank you. Thank you again for being on the panel, as well as my colleagues here for their answers. The key thing for us is really one of the things I think, Sammy, you and I have talked about is that the whole research focus in UAE is changing. It is not the same as the research focus. You know, we cannot take the research focus that is like in Europe and apply it to GCC region. And some of it has been done, as you're very aware, in UAE. You know, there were people who want to start projects on new technology, blockchains, projects on, you know, how can we take blockchains and apply it to something in UAE? How can we do this? How can we do that new technology? And what that was an unfocused effort. It was too diluted. It almost felt like a veneer. And so I think recently, I think number of changes are coming out, and it's coming down from top down. So, and they're in the right direction. You know, I've been, as I said, over 2 years here. This is my 3rd year, and I'm seeing some of those changes happening. So what are the changes? I mean, the key thing you saw was a cabinet reshuffle announced on Sunday here in UAE, focused on digital economy. You know, they want to change, you know, processes, you know, from being manual process to digital processes. They've got a, you know, minister for advanced technology and research now. And they've created this new institute, Advanced Research and Technology Council, of which now I am part of, because the Technology Innovation Institute is a critical part of that thing for that particular organization. So while all these buzzwords are there, but let's see what's behind that. And the thing which is behind it is really unique, which is, if I talk to, our leader, he says, yes, we want to take research, applied research, and apply it to a problem, solve some use cases that is local, and address that particular problem. So not only that research is done, it's funded in a focused way, and then applied to the industry here to basically take advantage of that research. And
again, it's the bottom up, huh?
Yes,
it's the bottom up approach.
Top down and bottom up both, right? The top down institutions are created in the sense that they will guide this research, but then the research people like myself are now allowed to kind of go and explore things that will help solve some use cases locally.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess by bottom up, I meant a more focused, a more like relevant type of research, and not to just copy the international agenda or the research programs from elsewhere. Max, I said I wanted to come back to you because I felt that I still haven't gotten the right answer for what would be the incentive for GCC-based researchers to work with IMEC, for example, or with the Fraunhofers, or with the Max Plancks in Germany, or the TNO in the Netherlands. Those applied, large, well-established applied research organizations in Europe. How could this region benefit from these well-established research organizations? And we still have 13 minutes before we end this session. I want to keep some time for you guys to answer some questions that have arrived from the audience.
Well, let me make it very, very quick. First of all, if you look at Silicon Valley, if you look at China, if you look at across the globe, the new companies are being created by young people. The youth of the region, look at what their parents did, look at the society around them, and are the source of inspiration to say, I don't want to do it this way, I want to do it in a better way. I make partners with anyone who has a better idea of doing something. It's not all invented in one place. IMEC collaborates with all companies, with all countries. And look, the youth and the governments of the region have been able to bring someone like you, someone like Dr. Thakur into the region. We can easily also join the youth and join together, bring the technologies that is needed. It shouldn't all be invented there in order for it to solve a problem there. So IMEC has same thing with Fraunhofer. If you go knock on their door, I'm sure they will be delighted to collaborate with any company in the region. If you look at IMEC, 76% of our revenue comes directly in collaboration with companies. And today I am very proud to say that 5 years ago, the majority of the companies where Tiki spent most of his life in, HP, Apple, Intel. Today, there is a large number of startups that they're working with us. And quite honestly speaking, they're equally as bright, equally as aggressive, equally as eager to change the world as the other ones. So we extend a hand to the researchers and the youth of the Gulf region to let us help them solve the societal needs of the region, join forces together, because quite honestly, no one does it by themselves. I still have 10 minutes left for you.
Thank you very much. Maria Luisa, this is the right time for you to tell us how could the European Commission programs help bridge or bring all these opportunities together, the youth, the young entrepreneurs in the region, the young researchers, with all the well-established knowledge institutions, research institutions that are based in Europe.
Yes, I'm sorry, forgetting to unmute. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sure. I mean, I think this is the time when you know, the Commission is really positioning itself as a geopolitical commission, which would imply that yes, we are trying to have a you know, a more significant dialogue with the GCC region and countries. So we expect that this will bring up new opportunities. As I said before, I think there are many areas that will require really young talents, and the region is very well endowed with youth and so on. It's a very young population, so we were really trying to have a shift towards, for example, climate neutral economy. You know that a main pillar has been of the Commission has been the Green Deal. So we are really focusing a lot of attention into this area, which is not only about energy. It includes also protecting the biodiversity, also you know, looking at the food system, farm to fork. So not only agriculture, but also the industry. So there are plenty of opportunities to really change the paradigm of our economy. And now I think with the COVID-19, we have even a much bigger responsibility in terms of building back better, as it's said by the Commission.
We definitely need to put more action and energy into those dialogue and networks that you talked about, Maria Luisa. Thank you very much. John, I'd like to hear from Jihan if we have any questions from the participants to address to our panel.
If you click at the bottom there, they'll come up for you under questions and you'll be able to read them yourself. If you go down to the bottom there, there's one, I see one.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so I have a comment from David West. It says, we already have dedicated data connectivity between the EU research and education community and national research and education networks in individual GCC countries, including Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and soon with the UAE. Do the panelists have any advice for building greater regional cooperation between the GCC countries and the research and education communities, R&E? I guess we kind of touched on this issue already, in terms of modalities, ideas for, I see like there are a lot of appetite and need for working together between the two regions, but there seem to be not enough mechanisms, instruments to really foster these engagements, to create more engagements and to create more traffic between the two regions. It seems like perhaps you, John, through Bussola, being based in Brussels, you could play a bigger role engaging the European Commission with the different counterparts in the region. Maybe this is a good time to pass back to you to give us your.
You can be assured that as a result of today and what has grown out of it, we'll be in touch with Maria Luisa and indeed with all of you to get some further guidance on how we can propose ideas that might take this forward. So it has been a remarkable discussion, and I want to say on behalf of the board of directors of the Bussola Institute and my own, I'm really, really grateful to all four of you for, I was looking at myself on the screen as well, so only four, for, you know, this webinar today. And thank you so much to our three panelists, Max, Tiki and Maria Luisa, for joining us. Your contributions were brilliant. They were engaging, they were informative, they were enlightening, and we could listen to you for hours yet. but we will be in contact with you, because I think now that we've got to know you, we'll move the thing forward. And I want to say to Sammy, before I thank him for being moderator, I thank him so much for suggesting the speakers for today. I know Sammy for several years, going almost back to the days when we were both tangentially involved with OECD. Right through our paths have crossed many times. And I'm really so grateful to you, Sammy, for your support.
Thank you, John, for the opportunity.
Over the years, and indeed for moderating the session so professionally today, based on your vast experience and expertise. And, you know, there is no doubt about it. We will follow on from today's event with either other activities, or certainly we'll do more work. So we certainly will be back to all of you again, if you're willing. And thank you so much. Sorry, Maria Luisa, that we couldn't see you, but we'll get to meet you in person in the very near future. And again, I'm very grateful to all of our attendees today. And as I say at the end of every webinar, I look forward to inviting you, or to welcoming you back to our next webinar, and maybe the one after that. But what I'm really looking forward to is when we can reopen our premises in Brussels again, in Square de Muse, and when we can have face-to-face events when we're allowed to do so. So a special word of thanks to all of you and to the team at Bussola. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Just very quickly, I'd like to thank you, Maria Luisa and Tiki and Max, especially Max, waking up extra early in the morning on the West Coast for us. And thank you, John, for the opportunity, and many thanks for the participants that have listened to us today. And please feel free to send through email or any other channel on social media where I exist, any questions you have about this particular topic.
Thank you all very much. Thanks, Jihan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Looking forward to meeting you.
Okay, thanks, Maria.